Chapter 1. Jorvik. I tried to hold myself back, tried to maintain some semblance of control, but her words, her desperate plea, shattered everything. Her voice was like a thread weaving through me, pulling me into her in a way that I couldn't resist. The bond between us, the invisible force that had always been there, surged, stronger now than ever before, and I couldn't fight it any longer. Her eyes locked with mine, dark and full of longing, and I knew in that instant she was ready to trust me completely. And that trust, that raw vulnerability was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. She didn't have to say another word. Everything was clear. "Please, Jorvik," she whispered again, her voice trembling slightly. It was soft, almost fragile, but the intensity behind it set fire to every part of me. She wanted this, wanted me, and the desperation in her voice made it impossible for me to hold back any longer. I leaned down, my heart racing, and kissed her. The kiss was slow at first, tentative, as if we were both testing the waters. But as the minutes passed, the tension between us grew, and the kiss deepened. It was a kiss filled with years of longing, with all the things left unsaid, with everything we had both been too afraid to face until now. She responded to me, her body molding against mine as though it had always been meant to be this way. Her hands found my shoulders, pulling me closer, urging me to take the next step. The need between us was palpable, almost suffocating. But it wasn't just about the desire. It was something far more profound, something unspoken but understood. This was about more than just the bond. It was about trust, about finally accepting each other, about becoming one in a way that we never had before. I pulled away from her lips, my breath coming in heavy gasps as I looked down at her. She was beautiful, absolutely stunning, and the way she was looking at me made me feel like the luckiest man alive. But it also filled me with a sense of responsibility. I had never been more certain of anything than I was right now. I was here to protect her, to make sure she never had to feel alone again. "Jorvik," she whispered, and it was enough to bring me back to the present, back to the moment where everything else faded away. I could feel the tension in her body, the uncertainty still lingering, and that was when I realized I needed to reassure her. She needed to know she was safe with me, that this was something we could both take at our own pace, that there was no rush. "I'm not going anywhere, Myra," I said, my voice soft but firm. "I'm not going to hurt you. I need you to trust me. All of me." Her eyes filled with something raw, something I hadn't seen in her before, complete trust. She had been hesitant, so guarded before, but now I could see that she was letting go, opening up to me in a way that my heart swelled. And that trust, that raw vulnerability, was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. She didn't have to say another word. Everything was clear. "I trust you," she said. And in those 3 words, everything shifted. It was like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders, off both of us. And in that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I could feel the heat between us, the undeniable pull, and I wanted nothing more than to be closer, to fill every part of her with everything I had. But I knew it wasn't just about what we were doing now. It was about the emotional connection we were building, the foundation we were laying for everything that would come after. This was about us learning how to be together, truly together, in every way possible. Her hands ran down my chest, the touch gentle but urgent, and I could feel her need for me, for this connection, just as much as I needed it. We had both been through so much, and yet here we were, finding each other most unexpectedly. "You're everything to me, Jorvik," she said, her voice trembling, and it made my chest ache. Her words were more than I could have ever asked for. She wasn't just saying she trusted me, she was saying she wanted to be with me completely and thoroughly. That was everything. "I'm here, Myra," I murmured, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "Always." She kissed me again, this time with more urgency, more passion, as if she were finally giving herself over completely without hesitation. I kissed her back, my hands roaming over her body, but this time it was slower, more deliberate. I wasn't in a rush. I wanted to savor this moment, to memorize how it felt to be with her like this, to feel her trust in me, her heart in my hands. The bond between us pulsed, and I could feel it deep within me, a thread that had always been there, but now was stronger than ever. It wasn't just about the physical connection. It was about our hearts, our souls intertwining in a way that nothing could ever break. "You're mine," I whispered against her lips, and she smiled, her eyes closed, savoring the words. It wasn't possessiveness in the way I had once feared. It was a promise that we were in this together, no matter what came next. "I'm yours," she replied, her voice low and filled with certainty. And in that moment, I knew she meant it. She was finally entirely mine, and I was hers. We were bound together, not just by fate, but by love, by trust, by the promises we had made to each other. As we held each other close, I knew there would be challenges ahead, things we would have to work through, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of them, because together we could face anything, and nothing would ever tear us apart.
Chapter 2. Myra. I wanted to cry in Jorvik's arms for hours after everything that had just happened. His words had shaken me, but more than that, his actions had comforted me in a way I didn't think was possible. He had cleaned me gently afterwards, applied ointment between my legs to soothe the ache, and then held me in his arms, curling up in bed together, sharing soft kisses. His care was overwhelming, and in that moment, I felt a sense of safety, protected, loved. It was a kind of tenderness I didn't expect, but it felt like exactly what I needed. But when I woke up, the bed was empty and I frowned, the feeling of emptiness creeping in again. It wasn't that I resented his absence, but the warmth of his body, the comfort of knowing he was nearby, was something I had come to rely on. Sighing softly, I got dressed quickly, trying to shake off the grogginess of sleep as I stepped out of the small bedroom. Jorvik and Hunter were sitting together, their expressions serious as they discussed something quietly. The moment they saw me, however, their faces softened and their eyes lit up with relief. It was like the weight of whatever they had been talking about lifted slightly just from seeing me. "You're awake on time," Hunter said, his voice calm, though his eyes betrayed a hint of concern. "We're about to land in half an hour." I nodded absently, still feeling the remnants of sleep pulling at my mind. I hadn't realized how exhausted I was until now. "How are you feeling?" Jorvik asked, his gaze heavy on me. There was a hunger there, but it wasn't just physical, it was emotional, a deep longing that tugged at my heart. I couldn't ignore the way his presence made me feel, how his eyes seemed to see right through me, pulling me closer even when I was trying to keep my distance. "Fine," I croaked, fighting another yawn. I saw the way his gaze softened, but his eyes still held that insatiable hunger, the kind that made me feel exposed and vulnerable, yet strangely empowered at the same time. It's going to be an hour's drive from the airport, Jorvik continued, his voice steady, but the underlying tension in it wasn't lost on me. We'll go to the location, retrieve the servers, and head back. Let us know if you feel tired at any point. We can adjust the plan. I'll keep that in mind, I said, trying to mask the weariness in my voice. I wanted to say more, to share how I was feeling, but I didn't want to distract them from whatever it was they were dealing with. So I settled into silence, watching them as they returned to their conversation. As soon as we landed, we were back on the road, and this time, Jorvik was driving while Hunter sat beside me in the back. I leaned against him, feeling the weight of his arm around me, grounding me as we moved through the familiar streets. His presence was comforting, steady, and I let myself relax for a moment. I closed my eyes, letting the hum of the car and his whispered words of comfort lull me back into sleep. I couldn't help but feel the growing need to be closer to both of them. It was hard to ignore the pull between us, but I didn't know how to navigate it without complicating everything further. When I woke again, the bed was empty and I frowned, the feeling of emptiness creeping in again. It wasn't that I resented his absence, but the warmth of his body, the comfort of knowing he was nearby, was something I had come to rely on. Sighing softly, I got dressed quickly, trying to shake off the grogginess of sleep as I stepped out of the small bedroom. Jorvik and Hunter were sitting together, their expressions serious as they discussed something quietly. The moment they saw me, however, their faces softened and their eyes lit up with relief. It was like the weight of whatever they had been talking about lifted slightly just from seeing me. "You're awake on time," Hunter said, his voice calm though his eyes betrayed a hint of concern. "We're about to land in half an hour." I nodded absently, still feeling the remnants of sleep pulling at my mind. I hadn't realized how exhausted I was until now. "How are you feeling?" Jorvik asked, his gaze heavy on me. There was a hunger there, but it wasn't just physical. It was emotional, a deep longing that tugged at my heart. I couldn't ignore the way his presence made me feel, how his eyes seemed to see right through me, pulling me closer even when I was trying to keep my distance. "Fine," I croaked, fighting another yawn. I saw the way his gaze softened, but his eyes still held that insatiable hunger, the kind that made me feel exposed and vulnerable, yet strangely empowered at the same time. "It's going to be an hour's drive from the airport," Jorvik continued, his voice steady, but the underlying tension in it wasn't lost on me. "We'll go to the location, retrieve the servers, and head back. Let us know if you feel tired at any point. We can adjust the plan." "I'll keep that in mind," I said, trying to mask the weariness in my voice. I wanted to say more, to share how I was feeling, but I didn't want to distract them from whatever it was they were dealing with. So I settled into silence, watching them as they returned to their conversation. As soon as we landed, we were back on the road. This time, Jorvik was driving while Hunter sat beside me in the back. I leaned against him, feeling the weight of his arm around me, grounding me as we moved through the familiar streets. His presence was comforting, steady, and I let myself relax for a moment. I closed my eyes, letting the hum of the car and his whispered words of comfort lull me back into sleep. I couldn't help but feel the growing need to be closer to both of them. It was hard to ignore the pull between us, but I didn't know how to navigate it without complicating everything further. When I woke up again, the bed was empty and I frowned, the feeling of emptiness creeping in again. It wasn't that I resented his absence, but the warmth of his body, the comfort of knowing he was nearby, was something I had come to rely on. Sighing softly, I got dressed quickly, trying to shake off the grogginess of sleep as I stepped out of the small bedroom. Jorvik and Enter were sitting together, their expressions serious as they discussed something quietly. The moment they saw me, however, their faces softened and their eyes lit up with relief. It was like the weight of whatever they had been talking about lifted slightly just from seeing me. "You're awake on time," Hunter said, his voice calm, though his eyes betrayed a hint of concern. "We're about to land in half an hour." I nodded absently, still feeling the remnants of sleep pulling at my mind. I hadn't realized how exhausted I was until now. "How are you feeling?" Jorvik asked, his gaze heavy on me. There was a hunger there, but it wasn't just physical. It was emotional, a deep longing that tugged at my heart. I couldn't ignore the way his presence made me feel, how his eyes seemed to see right through me, pulling me closer even when I was trying to keep my distance. "Fine," I croaked, fighting another yawn. I saw the way his gaze softened, but his eyes still held that insatiable hunger, the kind that made me feel exposed and vulnerable, yet strangely empowered at the same time. "It's going to be an hour's drive from the airport," Jorvik continued, his voice steady, but the underlying tension in it wasn't lost on me. "We'll go to the location, retrieve the servers, and head back. Let us know if you feel tired at any point. We can adjust the plan." "I'll keep that in mind." I tried to mask the weariness in my voice. I wanted to say more, to share how I was feeling, but I didn't want to distract them from whatever it was they were dealing with. So I settled into silence, watching them as they returned to their conversation. As soon as we landed, we were back on the road, and this time Jorvik was driving while Hunter sat beside me in the back. I leaned against him, feeling the weight of his arm around me, grounding me as we moved through the familiar streets. His presence was comforting, steady, and I let myself relax for a moment. I closed my eyes, letting the hum of the car and his whispered words of comfort lull me back into sleep. I couldn't help but feel the growing need to be closer to both of them. It was hard to ignore the pull between us, but I didn't know how to navigate it without complicating everything further. When I woke up again, the car had stopped, and we were at the same building where I had kept my servers. The familiar space felt both comforting and eerie. The brothers immediately took charge, ensuring the area was secure before I went inside to retrieve the equipment. The security system was intact, and I felt a small wave of relief wash over me. My servers were still here, untouched. But I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread, though. Whoever had been after them before had left a mark, and now I had to be sure they hadn't tampered with them. I checked everything, and once we were done, the servers were loaded into the truck and we were on our way again. But then, as I was packing up, I noticed a white piece of paper.
Chapter 3. Myra. Tell me everything in as much detail as possible. Don't leave anything out, I demanded, sitting down next to the brothers. Jorvik gave Hunter a sharp look, and I could tell the atmosphere was more tense than Hunter's usual laid-back attitude suggested. Hunter wasn't showing it, but this was serious, and I could feel the weight of the moment. The impersonator tried to disrupt Valen's systems and failed. Now he's hunting down Morgan in frustration, Jorvik said, and I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in. That's bad. Even when I dug through Valen's systems, I was never reckless enough to do something like that. This impersonator is asking for trouble and dragging me into it. They're practically putting a target on my back, I said, my mind spinning as I processed everything. The codes kept replaying in my head, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being overwhelmed. It was like my mind was racing a mile a minute. The good news is Rick might be able to track the impersonator down, Hunter added. We could reach out to him and see if he can help us narrow it down. I couldn't help but wonder aloud, what would you even say to him?
Hey, Rick, I know you almost got caught by Morgan, but don't worry. The one who tried to hack you is the fake. The real Thorn is here, snooping around your system and knows exactly what you're planning in the Arctic. I chuckled bitterly, trying to inject some humor into the situation. Jorvik scoffed, and Hunter gave me a mischievous grin. I'd love to see how Valen reacts to that, Hunter teased. I rolled my eyes and leaned back in my seat, looking out the window as we began our descent for landing. A heavy silence fell between the three of us. We all seemed lost in thought, each of us grappling with the magnitude of the situation. It was all the result of my actions, and the guilt started to settle in. I couldn't help but wonder if the moon goddess had a hand in all of this. After all, I had tried to push away my mates, especially Jorvik, and made things more complicated for him. If this were her way of balancing the scales, it wouldn't surprise me. I crossed my arms across my chest, slouching in my seat, trying to think through the codes in my head once again. One was in binary, the other in the alphabet. I kept going over them in my mind, even as we landed. Meanwhile, the brothers were engaged in a discussion about the trial they were supposed to attend later that evening. Once we were back at the pack, I immediately got to work on my servers. Jorvik provided me with a second library, large enough to accommodate all the systems I needed to set up. I dove straight into it, configuring everything to ensure that each server was connected and working correctly. Hunter stayed by my side, but Jorvik had to leave for his meeting with the lawyers. Before he left, he gave me a quick kiss, and it made my heart race. Despite my nervousness about their trial, the brothers were calm. They didn't let it faze them, and neither one of them made me feel like it was happening because of my actions. Their nonchalant attitude only made me want to fix everything that much faster. I had been slacking off for too long, and now the situation had gotten out of hand. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to clean up the mess I created. By late afternoon, I had finished setting up the servers. Everything was working as it should. Hunter had to leave for the trial, but I stayed behind. I thought about going with them, but I knew I'd only feel anxious and out of place. I didn't want to keep reminding myself that all of this, everything we were going through, was my fault. I needed to be alone with my thoughts and focus on fixing the damage. I stayed in the library determined to make progress. I ran diagnostics on the servers as soon as I could access the data, eager to make sure everything was secure. It didn't take long to confirm that the systems hadn't been compromised. Someone had tried to access them remotely, but the security I had put in place had held strong. I also checked the camera footage, and surprisingly, it was all intact. No one had tampered with it. I spent hours reviewing the footage while running additional tests to ensure nothing had been planted in the system that could be triggered later. I was surrounded by screens again, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like I was regaining control. My cybonic arm moved with purpose, and despite the chaos unfolding, I felt as though I was regaining the confidence and fearlessness I once possessed. My wolf, too, seemed at peace for a while. We were still in the midst of a crisis, but something about this felt right again. As I continued to review the footage, I finally spotted something. Almost a month after my accident, when I had been in the hospital, someone had managed to slip past the security measures I had put in place at my house. I focused on the figure on the screen. The person was wearing a black hoodie, their face completely covered. Despite the anonymity, something about their movements felt oddly familiar. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was a strange sense of recognition. The more I watched, the more certain I became that I knew this person. The woman moved through the house, checking various rooms before heading down to the basement. She pulled out a note from her hoodie pocket, placed it on one of the servers, and then made her way upstairs. She stood in front of the primary surveillance camera, staring directly into the lens. After a few moments, she removed her glasses and mask. When I saw her face, I gasped. It was a face I recognized all too well. The same eyes, the same features. It was like looking in a mirror. "No way," I muttered under my breath. My heart skipped a beat as I scrambled for the codes I had been obsessing over. I quickly found them, and when I checked the two codes, they both read the same name. Ravon.
Chapter 4. Jorvik. The trial lasted for hours, but it went smoothly. Hunter and I didn't have to do much. Our lawyers handled everything. Our only role was to be present. The long hours dragged on, making the entire experience tedious. Even though I was in the pack hall, attending the trial with my brother, my thoughts were back home with Myra. I couldn't help but wonder what she was doing while we were here. I knew she had started working on the servers as soon as we arrived. I was sure she was still at it when the trial ended in the evening. As soon as it was over, we hurried home to see her. We found her exactly where I expected, sitting in the library, surrounded by her computers, her eyes glued to the screens, wholly absorbed in her work. She didn't even notice us enter. Finally, when she saw us, her face lit up. Her excitement to see us always pleased me, but today, there was something extra in her enthusiasm. "Is everything working?" I asked, surveying her setup. I had been planning to create a dedicated office space for her to work in, comfortably, away from the chaos of the pack hall. "Yes, and you wouldn't believe it, but I cracked the code," she replied with a grin. "Really? I haven't heard from the cryptologist yet." But she shook her head. "I told you they wouldn't be able to crack it. It was personal," she explained, turning back to her screens with a more serious expression. "What did it say? Did you figure out who's behind all of this?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. Hunter sat by her side, looking at her work with interest. Hunter gasped when he saw the image on the screen. I walked over to see what had made him react so strongly. The woman's face was familiar. She looked a lot like Serafina, but with different hair. "Who is she?" Hunter asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and shock. "This is my half-sister," Serafina replied, her tone cold and bitter. "You have biological siblings?" I asked in surprise. I felt a pang of guilt for not knowing more about her family history, but I'd never asked her about it before. "She's the only one I know of. I grew up in the orphanage with her, but she disappeared one day. We didn't get along, and it was assumed she ran away and died. I never thought I'd see her again," Serafina said, her voice trailing off as she stared at the screen, her gaze distant. "After all these years?" The contempt in her voice was unmistakable. "But how did she know about you being Morgan?" Hunter asked, his voice filled with confusion. I shared the same question. "We'll ask her when we catch her," Serafina said with a sharp edge to her tone. "She's already caused me enough trouble. Now she's going too far. I'm going to make her regret this when I catch her." "Calm down, Serafina," Hunter said, trying to lighten the mood. He wrapped his arm around her, but she remained tense, her eyes burning with anger. The tension in her body was palpable, and dark circles were starting to form under her eyes. "You had a long day," I said, trying to ease the situation. "We'll deal with this tomorrow." "Are you serious?" Serafina snapped. "I can't rest until she's caught. You don't understand. She's dangerous." "Like you?" Hunter whispered teasingly. And for a brief moment, I saw Serafina look at him as though she were ready to both kiss and punch him at the same time. "I'll have my men look for her, Myra," I assured her. "But you need to get some rest first. You've been at this for too long." "Huh. Have your men look for her.
How did that go last time with me? Serafina scoffed. She's not right in the head. You men wouldn't be able to do anything. And that's why only you can find her? I asked, crossing my arms over my chest, giving her a firm look. Serafina shrugged, her nonchalant attitude returning. Well, we came from the same woman, and as far as I know, she wasn't right in the head either. Would it surprise you if we inherited some of her madness? Serafina said with a bitter laugh. I'm not mad, I said, trying to reassure her. Well, I'm not exactly sane, Serafina said wryly. But it's not about me. It's about her. She's the one causing all this trouble. We can't waste any more time. She's out there putting even more targets on my back. She did it with Valen, and now she might do it with the Drakens. We don't have time to sit around. I grunted in frustration, knowing she was right. We had to act before the situation worsened. Tell us more about her, I urged. We'll take care of it from here. Serafina sighed deeply, but she gave in and started telling us more about her half-sister. Her name is Arika Irkwood, and she...
Chapter 5. Myra. We walked down the stairs, and a familiar warmth spread through me. Every step I took seemed to bring me closer to Hunter, and I couldn't ignore the sense of calm that settled over me when he was near. It wasn't just the way his presence filled the space around us, but the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the room, the only one who mattered. I tried to focus on anything else, but there was no mistaking it. The air around us was thick with something more than just affection. It was a connection I couldn't deny. His gaze lingered on me, and I felt my heart rate quicken, as it always did when he was near. Suddenly, without warning, Hunter swept me into his arms. "Hunter!" I exclaimed, laughing in surprise, my hands instinctively wrapping around his shoulders to steady myself. His arms were strong around me, and for a moment I thought I might stay there forever, safe and cherished. "You're so touchy today," I teased, trying to wriggle free from his playful grip, but he only tightened it, his smile growing wider, more knowing. "Can you blame me?" he replied, his voice teasing, but with a more profound, quieter sincerity that made my stomach flip. There was something in the way he said it, as if there was no other place he would rather be. The world outside seemed to fade, and it was just the two of us, caught in a moment of pure, unspoken understanding. I tried to shake off the warmth that spread through me at the sound of his words. "You're impossible," I muttered, though a smile was tugging at the corners of my lips. His touch was gentle, but his presence was magnetic, pulling me in even when I thought I could resist. He walked me down the stairs as if I weighed nothing, his grip never wavering, and I laughed again, this time with a sense of giddiness I hadn't expected. The familiar comfort of his arms was like a haven, but it was the playful energy between us that felt like the spark we shared. His every movement seemed to exude confidence, and yet there was always that vulnerability that made me want to know him even more deeply. When we finally reached the bottom, Hunter gently set me down on my feet. He looked at me, his hands resting on my shoulders, as though he needed a moment to center himself. I couldn't help but notice the slight tension in his gaze, like there was something he wanted to say, but he was waiting for the right moment. I could feel his affection, not just through his touch, but through the intensity of his eyes. "You're impossible," I repeated, trying to act frustrated, but my voice was softer than I intended, betraying the warmth in my chest. Hunter didn't answer for a second. Instead, he let out a low chuckle, and there was something so magnetic about the sound that I found myself drawn closer to him. "You know I can't resist you, Myra," he said, his voice quiet, almost reverent. The way he said my name made me feel like I was the only person in the room, the only one who mattered. We stood there in silence, the air between us thick with emotion. It wasn't just attraction,
but something more profound. A bond built over time through shared experiences, vulnerability, and care. I had never felt so understood, so valued, as I did when I was with him. The room seemed to disappear, leaving just us in this small, intimate moment where words weren't necessary. He leaned closer, his hand brushing against mine as he stepped back slightly. "I guess we should eat," I said softly, trying to break the tension in my voice, though it came out with a breathlessness I couldn't hide. My heart was racing, my thoughts scattered in the wake of everything that had just passed between us. Hunter smiled, but it wasn't the teasing smile I was used to. There was a gentleness to it now, a softness that made me feel like he understood exactly what I needed without me saying a word. "Let's eat," Hunter said, his eyes never leaving mine. But we both know it's never just about dinner. I didn't know how to respond to that. He was right. It wasn't just about food, or even the moment we were sharing. It was everything between us, everything unsaid but understood. The way we connected, the way he made me feel, it was all more than what I could put into words. As if sensing my hesitation, Hunter reached out and gently cupped my cheek. The warmth of his touch spread through me, calming the fluttering in my chest. "You're not alone, Myra," he whispered, his voice full of promise. I nodded, the words I wanted to say caught in my throat. Instead, I closed the distance between us, placing my hand over his and pressing it gently to my face, as if to solidify the moment. We didn't need words to say everything we felt. We walked toward the dining room, the tension between us still hanging in the air, but softened, no longer a heavy weight. It was replaced by something lighter, more tender. The unspoken promise of what was to come, a shared meal, a shared life, and all the things we had yet to explore together.
Chapter 6. Hunter. I could feel the air between us shift, thick with unspoken tension. Every step we took felt like we were edging closer to something inevitable, something neither of us could deny any longer. My heart pounded harder with each glance she sent my way, the chemistry between us like a current, pulling us toward each other. It wasn't just physical, though I could feel that too, but deeper, something emotional, something raw and honest that made everything else in the world feel distant. As I looked into her eyes, I saw something mirrored in them that I felt deeply in my chest. There was a longing, an understanding between us that couldn't be put into words, but only felt. And then when she reached for my hand, her touch was a silent agreement, an acknowledgement that we were both feeling the same thing, this undeniable pull that had always been there. She slowly closed the distance between us, and my breath caught. It wasn't anything dramatic, just a simple act of her being near me, her presence filling the space like a magnet, drawing me in. I could feel the anticipation building, not from the usual rush of physical need, but from something more profound. She was everything to me, and the weight of that truth settled over me in that moment. I leaned in slightly, my heart racing in the silence. "You're everything to me," I murmured, barely able to keep the words contained. She didn't respond with words at first, but the way she looked at me, softly yet intensely, was all I needed. She understood. We didn't need to explain ourselves. Her fingers found mine again, and I could feel the heat of her touch traveling through me. She squeezed my hand gently, as if grounding me in the moment, and I gave a small, appreciative smile. Her eyes glinted with something playful, but also something more profound, a hunger. But not the kind that would burn us out too quickly. No, this was the kind of hunger that wanted to savor, to take its time. "I want you to know that you're safe," I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She looked up at me, her face softening with that quiet vulnerability that only she ever allowed me to see. "With me, you're always safe." She didn't say anything at first, but the way she held on to me spoke volumes.
Her chest rose and fell softly with each breath, and I could feel the slight tremor in her fingers, as though she was just as affected by this moment as I was. My heart ached with a mix of tenderness and longing, emotions I had long kept hidden but couldn't contain anymore. Slowly, gently, I brought my hand to her face, my thumb brushing against her skin, as if committing the feel of her to memory. "I've missed you," I murmured, the words not nearly enough to express everything I felt. But I didn't need to say more. The air between us was heavy with everything unspoken. Her breath hitched, but she closed the gap between us, her lips meeting my own in a kiss that was soft, almost tentative at first, as if we were both testing the waters, seeing if this moment, this connection, was as real as it seemed. When she deepened the kiss, her lips moving more confidently against mine, I knew it was. We pulled apart slowly, both of us breathing a little more complicated now, but neither of us rushing to fill the silence. The connection was still there, hanging in the air between us, just as palpable as before. I could feel her heart beating just as quickly as mine, could see the faint flush on her cheeks, the way her chest rose and fell with the rhythm of her breath. She was as affected as I was, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought. She was everything I needed, and it wasn't just her body that I wanted, though I longed for that too, but it was her heart, her soul. I brushed a strand of hair from her face, my hand lingering for a moment on her cheek. The tenderness of the touch, the way it made her lean into it, made my heart skip a beat. She was everything to me. "You're incredible, Myra," I whispered, my voice low with emotion. She gave me a small, sincere smile, her eyes soft and filled with the same depth I felt in my chest. "And you?" she whispered back, her hand finding its way back to my chest, her fingers brushing lightly against my heart. "You're my everything." We stood there, silent, for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. The world outside could have fallen apart and I wouldn't have noticed. All I knew was that she was here, in my arms, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to let go. I wanted to stay like this, forever, close to her, connected in a way that transcended anything physical. This was something deeper, something more real. Finally, I broke the silence, my voice hoarse from the intensity of the moment. "Let's have dinner," I suggested softly, though I wasn't sure if either of us was really hungry. "But first, you've got to know, this, what we have, it's everything to me. I'm not going anywhere." She smiled, that familiar, warm smile that always made my heart swell. "I know," she said, her voice full of affection and trust. "And I'm not going anywhere either." As we moved to the dining table, I could feel the unspoken bond between us growing stronger with every step. This was just the beginning, and whatever came next, we would face it together. No more hesitation, no more holding back. We were in this, both of us, completely and irrevocably.
Chapter 7. Myra. The evening stretched on, but it felt like time had slowed down. There was something unspoken between us, a charge in the air that neither of us could ignore. The way Hunter and Jorvik looked at me, the way they spoke, their every gesture carrying more than simple affection. It was something deeper, more profound. It was as if they understood me in ways I wasn't used to, as if they knew exactly what I needed even before I did. I couldn't help but notice how close they were to me, how they kept seeking ways to comfort me without pushing. Hunter, always the more playful of the two, rested his arm around my shoulders, pulling me closer as if he knew that I needed to feel the connection, the grounding warmth of being near them. The tension in the room was palpably intense, but comforting. It wasn't a bad feeling. It was the kind of tension that promised something deeper, something more real than I had ever experienced before. "You're quiet tonight," Hunter said, his voice soft, filled with the concern that made my heart flutter. He always had that way of making me feel seen, heard, in ways no one else had before. Is everything okay? I nodded slowly, unable to voice the whirlwind of emotions inside me. I didn't have to explain. He could see it in my eyes, the flood of feelings, the uncertainty, the vulnerability I had always kept hidden. In their presence, I didn't feel like I had to keep all that bottled up. I leaned into him slightly, grateful for his touch. His arm tightened just enough to let me know he was there, that he wasn't going anywhere. It was a simple gesture, but it meant the world to me. I didn't have to hide anymore. Jorvik, who had been quietly watching the exchange, gave me a small, knowing smile. There was no judgment in his gaze, only understanding. His presence was calming, and I felt that familiar pull toward him, the silent invitation to lean into the security they both offered. "Hey," Jorvik said softly, his hand finding mine, squeezing gently. "We've got you. You don't need to carry everything by yourself." His words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how heavy my own emotions had been until now. I hadn't realized how much I had been trying to shoulder alone until they made me see it. The simple act of them both being here, of being with me, was enough. No grand gestures were needed. No words could explain the depth of what I was feeling. My heart swelled, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to relax. The tension in my chest loosened. My shoulders, once stiff from holding everything in, dropped. I wasn't used to trusting people like this, especially not in the way I was beginning to trust them. It was new, and I wasn't sure what it meant for me yet, but it felt right. Hunter's hand brushed through my hair gently, his thumb grazing over the side of my face. His touch was tender, and I found myself instinctively leaning into it. "I think we could all use some rest tonight," he said, his voice low and filled with the kind of softness I hadn't expected. I hadn't even realized how tired I was, not just physically, but emotionally. The day, the constant turmoil inside my own head, it had taken its toll on me. But now, with them both here, it felt like the weight was finally being lifted, little by little. It wasn't gone, but it was manageable. I could breathe again. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think that sounds good," I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. It wasn't just about sleep. It was the need to be close to them, to feel the warmth of their presence surrounding me as I drifted off to sleep. Jorvik stood, offering me his hand. "Come on," he said with a gentle smile. "Let's get you settled." I hesitated for just a moment before taking his hand. The way he looked at me, the care in his expression, it was like he was saying everything I needed to hear without actually speaking. His touch was warm, comforting, and for once I didn't feel the need to question it. I didn't feel the need to resist. As he led me toward the bedroom, I felt Hunter follow behind me, his presence solid, like a quiet strength I could always lean on. There was no hurry, no urgency. The night stretched out before us, unspoken but full of promise. Once we reached the bedroom, Jorvik guided me toward the bed, helping me settle in with a gentleness that made my heart flutter. It wasn't just about the physical act of lying down together. It was the intimacy of the moment, the simple act of being close, of feeling safe. They weren't asking for anything from me. They were there, offering me a place to rest, to let go. I lay back against the pillows, and Hunter moved to sit beside me, reaching for my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Rest," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "We'll be here when you wake up." Jorvik climbed into bed beside me, his arm pulling me closer, wrapping me in a protective embrace. I felt his steady beat against my back, his presence grounding me in a way I hadn't realized I needed. For the first time in what felt like forever, I let go. I relaxed into the bed,
into the safety they offered. The world outside seemed far away, and I let it stay there. Tonight was for us, for me, to exist in this moment. Thank you, I whispered, more to myself, but I felt them both hear me, touch me. You're welcome, Jorvik replied softly, his breath warm against my skin. Wolf got you, Myra? Always. I closed my eyes, the weight of the day finally lifting. There was nothing else I needed to worry about right now. Everything was right here, in this moment, with them, and that was enough.
Chapter 8. Jorvik. I couldn't stop thinking about Valen's email all day, especially the threats he'd made. It made my wolf restless and furious, the fact that he'd indirectly targeted my mate. The only thing that kept me from sending him a response declaring war was my willpower. I'd never been fond of Valen. His unpredictable and erratic nature always left me uneasy. But after reading that email, my resentment for him had grown to something much darker, something that tested every ounce of my self-control. Even so, I kept reminding myself that the email wasn't just full of threats. It was also an invitation to work together, a necessary collaboration considering the situation. But the thought of working with him made my nerves tingle with unease. When I got home after finishing some pack duties, I found Hunter and Serafina in the office, deep in discussion. She was sitting on his lap, looking relaxed, yet the serious conversation they were having suggested otherwise. Seeing her there made me realize just how much I'd missed her. Even though we'd spent the night together, I still craved her presence. My wolf was growing restless, wanting to bond completely, but we couldn't rush it. That thought gnawed at me, making my patience feel strained. A grunt escaped me as I watched them. I was glad we were finally making progress, but my wolf's need for her was more substantial than I'd anticipated. I couldn't ignore it, but I tried my best to stay composed. That is, until Myra's eyes met mine. The spark of mischief in them turned my focus from my brother to her in an instant, and suddenly the desire I'd been suppressing flared up. Before I could stop myself, I moved closer and captured her lips in a kiss. The soft moan she let out against my mouth only fueled the fire burning within me. I missed you, she whispered, her voice sending shivers down my spine. I tried to pull her into my arms, but she teased me with a smile and glanced at the screens. We were waiting for you, she said, her tone light, but her eyes told me everything I needed to know. I exchanged a glance with Hunter, confirming that this meeting was about Valen. He nodded at me, and the playful atmosphere in the room seemed to vanish in an instant. I hate when you two do that, Serafina muttered, looking at both of us with a frown. She poked me in the chest, a playful accusation in her voice. Do what? I asked, though I had a good idea. Hunter's chuckle only added to her frustration. Communicate silently, Serafina groaned, getting up from Hunter's lap. It makes me feel left out, she pouted, and Hunter flashed a mischievous grin at me. Stop doing it, she said, clearly irked. I gave my brother a sharp look, but he only grinned wider, knowing how to push my buttons. I, on the other hand, preferred it when she was soft and vulnerable with me, when her playfulness was more about us being together. I let out a sigh, trying to calm the situation. I'm sorry, baby girl, I said, stepping closer to her. I tilted her chin up gently and kissed her on the lips. We'll make sure to include you next time, I promised. Before Serafina could react, Hunter shot me a playful look, making things more complicated. She glared at him, frustrated, but he only chuckled. I saw it coming and quickly intervened before things got out of hand. Did you read the email from Valen? I asked, my tone now serious. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly as the focus returned to the issue at hand. Yes, she said, her face darkening. I think it's best if we talk to him. We need to figure something out, but we can't let him know that I'm the real culprit behind all this. I glanced at Hunter, seeking his opinion. He gave a quick nod. All of us are on the same page then, I stated firmly. We need to reach out to Valen as soon as possible and see what he has for us. When do we talk to him? Hunter started to ask, but I interrupted. Tonight, I said, my voice resolute.
I want to talk to him today. The longer we wait, the more damage Erika can cause. We need to act now." Serafina, though still troubled, nodded in agreement. "I'll do what I can," she said, her voice low. I placed a hand on her shoulder, giving her a reassuring squeeze. "We'll deal with it together," I told her, my tone softer, trying to ease her worries. She nodded, but I could feel the storm of thoughts still swirling inside her. The three of us sat in front of the large screen in the office, waiting for Valent to come online. The tension was thick in the air. This meeting had to go smoothly, but with Valent's unpredictable nature, I couldn't help but feel anxious. I'd made the mistake of dealing with him before, signing a trade treaty that ended badly and caused significant losses. I didn't know if he still held a grudge, but I had to prepare for the worst. This was a delicate situation, but the circumstances called for action. Finally, Valent appeared on the screen, his familiar, smug face greeting us. I couldn't help but scowl at the sight of him. "Who's that with you two?" Valent asked, the first words out of his mouth. "Rick, we missed you so much," Hunter said with a grin, his voice dripping with feigned enthusiasm. I tried to suppress the groan that wanted to escape, but it didn't go unnoticed by Serafina, who had shifted her attention to him. "Meet Myra, she's our mate," Hunter introduced her, and I couldn't help but study Rick's reaction. His gaze stayed on Serafina, and I could tell he wasn't thrilled about this new addition to our dynamic. "Wait, you two share a mate?" Valent asked, clearly surprised. "We're not here to discuss our relationships, Valent," I said bluntly, my patience thinning. "I want to make this quick. We need to catch Thorn before she causes more damage." Fine, but I deserve to know who I'm dealing with in these meetings," Valent replied, his tone dismissive. Serafina spoke up then, her voice steady but firm. "I know about Morgan. I've been looking for her for a long time and know more about her than anyone else." Her statement seemed to catch Valent's attention. I didn't like the gleam in his eyes. It felt like he was holding something back, like this was all part of some larger game he was playing. "Really?" Valent said, his voice dripping with interest. "Then tell me everything you know about her."
Chapter 9. Myra. Valen's question came with a bite, and I could hear the thinly veiled arrogance in his tone. His attitude was predictable, but I couldn't ignore the disdain he seemed to have for me and women in general. The way he spoke made it clear that he saw Lunas as nothing more than passive figures who should be confined to trivial duties, rather than being involved in the real work of the pack. A small part of me took solace in the fact that Valen, despite his position, was alone. There was a satisfaction in knowing he lacked a mate, unlike Jorvik, a small, quiet victory for me. I found myself briefly thinking about how his arrogant nature would ensure he remained that way, never truly understanding the value of partnership. But even as my mind wandered, I couldn't help but notice how his gaze narrowed when he saw me. It made me wonder if I should have given him more trouble before. But I quickly reminded myself that this wasn't the time for distractions. Erika and the servers were my focus now. "I know Morgan," I replied, my voice steady despite the tension. "I've been after her for a long time, and I know more about her than anyone else out there." It was a strange feeling referring to myself in the third person, but I held my ground. Valen raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. I could feel Jorvik's muscles tense beside me. His hand remained firmly in mine under the table, though his grip tightened slightly. "Really? Then tell me everything you know about her," he said, his interest piqued. I crossed my arms, feeling a slight burn of curiosity. "How do you know Thorn is a woman?" I asked, maintaining my calm. Valen let out a sharp laugh. "Only a woman would try to infiltrate my military systems and fail so spectacularly." His attitude was predictable, but I couldn't ignore the disdain he seemed to have for me, and women in general.
The way he spoke made it clear that he saw Lunas as nothing more than passive figures who should be confined to trivial duties, rather than being involved in the real work of the pack. A small part of me took solace in the fact that Valen, despite his position, was alone. There was a satisfaction in knowing he lacked a mate, unlike Jorvik, a small, quiet victory for me. I found myself briefly thinking about how his arrogant nature would ensure he remained that way, never truly understanding the value of partnership. But even as my mind wandered, I couldn't help but notice how his gaze narrowed when he saw me. It made me wonder if I should have given him more trouble before. But I quickly reminded myself that this wasn't the time for distractions. Erika and the servers were my focus now. "I know Morgan," I replied, my voice steady despite the tension. "I've been after her for a long time, and I know more about her than anyone else out there." It was a strange feeling referring to myself in the third person, but I held my ground. Valen raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. I could feel Jorvik's muscles tense beside me. His hand remained firmly in mine under the table, though his grip tightened slightly. "Really? Then tell me everything you know about her," he said, his interest piqued. I crossed my arms, feeling a slight burn of curiosity. "How do you know Thorn is a woman?" I asked, maintaining my calm. Valen let out a sharp laugh. "Only a woman would try to infiltrate my military systems and fail so spectacularly." His attitude was predictable, but I couldn't ignore the disdain he seemed to have for me, and women in general. The way he spoke made it clear that he saw Lunas as nothing more than passive figures who should be confined to trivial duties, rather than being involved in the real work of the pack. I clenched my fists under the table, feeling the urge to act on the fury rising inside me. He didn't know it, but his words were making things personal. The next time I had a chance, I would make sure he understood the consequences of underestimating me. "That's a rational way of thinking," I said flatly, doing my best to keep the bite out of my voice. Valen laughed again, and I could feel the disdain in his laughter. "I don't expect you to get it," he sneered. "But I know Thorn is a woman because I have eyes and ears in all the right places." The weathered witches, I thought to myself. The realization hit me like a slap. They must have been the ones to leak information about me, even though they had promised to keep everything confidential. The connection made me uneasy, and I couldn't help but wonder just how much they'd told him. For someone who prided himself on being a champion of misogyny, Valen had an interesting relationship with the witches. "We can trade information then," Jorvik suggested, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not sure how much I'll trust anything coming from her," he said, his voice dripping with doubt. Hunter stepped in, his voice casual yet supportive. "Trust her. She knows what she's talking about." His reassurance helped ground me, even though my mind was still racing with questions. "I find it strange that we haven't heard from Thorn in months, and now suddenly she's going after you," Jorvik added, his voice thoughtful. The implication hung in the air, and Valen seemed to pause, considering it carefully. Finally, Valen spoke again, his voice more contemplative. "I'm certain it's Thorn. I found traces of her work in the system. Her signature is there." I couldn't help but feel a wave of dread. Erika was just not causing trouble for me. She was aiming to destroy everything I had worked for. "We'd like to see those traces," Jorvik cut through the tension. Valen sighed, clearly irritated, but also resigned. "All right, I'll send you whatever I can, but you better be ready for what you find," he warned. Before he could disconnect, Hunter casually asked, "What exactly did she steal from you?" His jaw clenched and his nostrils flared. "None of your business," he snapped, the anger in his tone unmistakable. Then, without another word, he disconnected the call. Something to do with snow dust, I said quietly, turning to Hunter. I'm sure of it. I thought so too, he replied, his voice tense. Jorvik sighed. That went better than I expected, he said with a frown, but there was no humor in his voice. I wasn't sure what to make of the exchange, and I still felt a nagging unease. How did he know Thorn was a woman? Jorvik asked, his voice filled with suspicion. The Weddards, I replied, my frustration mounting. The witches love to gossip. It had to be them. I don't see any other source. And now I need to find out who betrayed me. I'll help you figure it out, Hunter said, giving me a reassuring squeeze on the hand. I could feel my thoughts spiraling, but before I could dive deeper into them, Hunter tugged me gently from my seat. Come with me, he said quietly, his voice full of determination.
Chapter 10. Hunter. The moment Velen's call ended, I could feel the shift in the room. It was almost as if the weight of his threats had hung in the air, pressing down on us all. But I could feel it most keenly in Myra. She'd been on edge all day, the stress from the call mixing with her worries. I could sense the anxiety in the way she held herself, the way her fingers drummed absent-mindedly on the table, the subtle clench of her jaw that she probably didn't even notice. She had come so far in her healing, but this new challenge was pushing her back into a place of uncertainty. And I couldn't let that happen, not if I could help it. I had tried everything to ease her, to distract her, but I could tell it wasn't enough. The situation with Erica regarding the servers was weighing on her, and I knew how much those servers meant to her. It wasn't just technology, it was her work, her passion. I couldn't imagine how it felt to have something so crucial at risk, and I didn't want to make things worse by pushing her too hard. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I couldn't let her bear this weight alone. Come with me, I said softly, my voice low and calming, but there was no mistaking the determination in it. I reached for her hand, gently pulling her away from the office and toward the hallway. I could feel Jorvik's gaze on us, understanding what I was trying to do. He didn't need to say anything. He just nodded and let us go. Myra didn't resist, though I could feel the pull of her thoughts, the storm swirling inside her. She sighed deeply, but I didn't stop. I led her to her room, ignoring the slight protest when we passed by the library where she had been trying to track the servers. I've been trying to track my lost servers, she said, her voice almost absent as she spoke about it, her mind still far from the moments we were in. I heard the words, but they didn't reach me. I was paying attention to her, to the way she carried herself, to the way the stress was building in her even though she was trying to hide it. As we stepped into her bedroom, I stopped and turned toward her. I could see the tension in her eyes, the way her shoulders were hunched. This wasn't just about the servers anymore. She was carrying something heavy, and I needed to help her unload it. Without thinking, I stepped closer, my hand moving to her arm, and gently but firmly, I guided her back against the wall. My chest was pressed against hers now, my hands resting lightly at her sides. Her breath hitched, and for a moment, the whole world seemed to stop. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I could see the flicker of surprise in them, but it wasn't fear. It was something else, something deeper, something that had been building between us. I could feel it, that undeniable pull, the connection we had that went beyond words, beyond the tension of the day. Enough with the "were," I said softly, my voice a gentle command, but there was warmth in it, something that invited her to relax, to let go. I could feel her body go still for a moment, her gaze flicking from my eyes to my lips and back. The energy between us shifted, becoming more than just a quiet moment of intimacy. It was a silent understanding, a bond between us that neither of us had to question. I waited for her to respond, and when she did, it was a soft chuckle, her breath mingling with mine. "Were you not paying any attention during the call?" she asked, her voice teasing. Still, her arms had already moved around me, pulling me closer until we were only inches apart. "No," I murmured, my voice a little hoarse. "I was thinking about you." The words were simple, but they held all the truth I needed to say. There was nothing else on my mind, nothing else I cared about. She laughed softly, and I could feel her body relax into mine as I gently pulled her closer, my arms wrapping around her waist. I held her there, not rushing, not forcing anything. I just wanted her to feel safe and at peace. "I'm sorry," she whispered after a moment, her voice soft and sincere. "I've just been so distracted. I didn't mean to bring all of that here." "You don't have to apologize," I told her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're allowed to feel what you feel. We're in this together. You don't have to carry it alone." My words were simple, but I meant them with everything I had. The weight of the day, of everything we were up against, was too much for one person to carry. I was here for her, no matter what. I could see the tension start to melt away piece by piece from her shoulders. The soft sigh she let out was like a release, like the air around her had cleared. My chest felt lighter knowing that she was letting go, even just a little. I pulled her gently toward the bed, and she followed without resistance. I let her settle into the blankets, my hand resting softly on her back. The world outside, with all its chaos and noise, felt miles away. It was just the two of us, here in this moment, and that's all that mattered. I sat next to her, my fingers gently tracing the lines of her hand, feeling the way her breath evened out as she relaxed. "We'll get through this," I said softly, more to myself than to her. She looked up at me, her eyes soft, the last traces of the day's stress fading into the warmth of her gaze. "Thank you," she whispered. The sincerity in her voice made my heart swell. I smiled, brushing my lips against her forehead. "Anytime, Myra. Anytime." We stayed like that for a while, just holding each other. The quiet between us comfortable, the connection between us growing stronger with every passing second. There was no rush, no need to move forward faster than we were ready for. For the first time in a long time, everything felt right.
Chapter 11. Hunter. After the call with Valen, I could feel the mood shift in the room. Myra had been tense all day, and I knew it wasn't just the stress of dealing with him that was bothering her. It was everything. The constant pressure of the situation, the threats against her work, and the lingering feeling of vulnerability that she had carried with her for years were all weighing on her. I could see it in her eyes, the exhaustion that had started to creep in despite her progress. Her healing was still fragile, and I could feel the tension radiating off her. The last thing I wanted was for her to overexert herself, to push too hard and undo everything she had worked so hard to overcome. I had to be there for her, even if she didn't realize it. I had been doing my best to ease her, but she was still distant, her thoughts miles away, constantly running through the possibilities of what could go wrong next. I understood that, but it hurt to see her carry all that weight by herself. "You're still so tense," I said softly, my voice filled with concern. "Come with me." I reached for her hand, my fingers brushing against hers. She hesitated for a moment before allowing me to lead her, the quiet tension in the air thickening with every step. Jorvik caught my eye, his expression understanding, and he gave me a slight nod.
He knew what I needed to do. As we passed by the library, I could see the conflict in her eyes, the pull to stay and keep working. But I wasn't going to let her. Not tonight. Not when she needed to take a step back and let go of the weight she was carrying. "I've been trying to track my servers," Myra said, her voice absent as she spoke, clearly still preoccupied. "I know they're not syncing properly, and I don't know why." I heard her words, but I wasn't listening to the technicalities. The truth was, I could tell her mind was already 1,000 miles away, and I wasn't going to let that distance grow any wider. When we finally made it to her bedroom, I closed the door behind us, the quiet of the room pressing in. "I need to help you relax," I said low, more for myself than for her, as I reached for her hand again. I gently pulled her toward the bed, feeling her body tense beneath my touch. But I wasn't going to let her retreat into herself again, not tonight. "I'm here for you," I continued, my hand cupping her cheek gently. "Let go of everything else, just for tonight." She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. The weight of the world was still in them, but it was softer now. She didn't have to say anything. I could feel it in the way she looked at me, the hesitation that melted away when she realized I wasn't letting her go through this alone. "I can't help it," she whispered, her voice full of frustration. "I've been doing this for so long, trying to fix everything. I don't know how to stop." I could feel her struggle, the walls she had built around herself, and I knew what she was saying without words. She didn't want to feel weak. She didn't want to depend on anyone else, but I wasn't going to let her carry this alone anymore. "Stop trying to fix everything," I said soothingly. "Just let me take care of you tonight." I guided her onto the bed gently, pulling the covers over us as I settled beside her. She hesitated for a moment, but then she relaxed, her body curling toward mine instinctively. The soft warmth of her presence filled the space between us, and for the first time that day, I could feel her breathing steadying. "I'm not going anywhere, Myra," I whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You don't have to worry about anything." She nodded slowly, but I could still feel the tension in her body, the unease that lingered despite the calming rhythm of my touch. I reached for her hand, gently threading my fingers through hers. "I've got you," I murmured, squeezing her hand softly. "You don't have to carry this alone. Let me help you." She closed her eyes for a moment, and I could feel the weight of everything she had been carrying start to fade just a little. But I knew it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be fixed with a single touch or a few soothing words. But this moment, just us together, was the first step. "I've got you," I repeated, my voice quieter now. I didn't need to say anything more. She didn't need me to fix everything tonight. She needed me to be here. I kissed her forehead softly, my lips lingering for a moment before pulling back to steady her face. Her expression had softened, her features relaxed for the first time that day. She wasn't entirely at peace yet, but we made progress. Slowly her breathing evened out, and the anxious energy that had surrounded her started to lift. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "I just needed this." I smiled, leaning down to kiss her forehead again. "You don't have to thank me," I said gently. "This is where you belong, right here with me." We stayed like that for a while, the quiet of the room settling around us. There was no rush, no pressure, just us. I wanted her to feel safe, to know that in this moment, everything else could wait. There was nothing more important than her, than us. The rest of the world seemed to fade away as I held her close. I didn't need to say anything else. we didn't need to talk. The silence between us was comforting, not uncomfortable. It was a space where we could just be. Eventually, I felt her breathing grow deeper, more even, and I knew she was finally beginning to relax. She had let go of the weight she had been carrying, if only for tonight, and I was here to help her carry whatever came next. We didn't need to rush. For the first time in what felt like forever, everything was okay. And with her in my arms, I knew that whatever came next, we'd face it together.
Chapter 12. Myra. I woke up the next day with Hunter beside me, and though there was a slight ache between my legs, I felt a sense of contentment I hadn't experienced in a long time, and the night had been full of closeness and comfort. After everything with Vilaine, with the pressure of dealing with my sister's sabotage and the constant anxiety that weighed me down, last night had been a reminder that I wasn't alone in this. Jorvik had shared something with me that I hadn't realized I was missing, a sense of belonging, of having someone who was always there for me no matter the challenges we faced. And Hunter, with his quiet strength, had been the calming force I needed. Together, they gave me something I didn't even know I craved: stability. But as much as I wanted to hold on to that feeling, morning wasn't my favorite time of day. I wasn't a morning person, to say the least. Even before everything that had happened, I was never one to greet the sun with a smile. My body hated the mornings even more now, after everything I had gone through. My mind still felt foggy, my body sore from the emotional weight of the past few days. But then, Hunter whispered soft, comforting words to me. He pulled me gently from the covers and into the shower. His touch was reassuring, and gradually the fog began to lift. The warm water on my skin relaxed me, and the tension I'd been holding in my body began to ease. As we stood there together, his hands moved to rub some soothing ointment between my legs. It was simple, but the gesture made me feel cared for, and I melted into him for a moment, allowing myself to be in the moment. My mind had been racing for so long, caught up in the whirlwind of everything going on, but in that moment, everything else seemed to disappear. It was just him and the quiet space between us. No words were necessary. I felt safe with him. After the shower, we headed down for breakfast, and as always, Jorvik joined us after his morning run. His presence was comforting, a familiar anchor in the storm that had been my life recently. My wolf stirred within me, content and purring as I settled on his lap, the warmth of both of them surrounding me. It felt like we were in our own little bubble, a place where I could find peace despite the world outside. The conversation between Hunter and Jorvik turned to pack matters, and I listened intently. I was still learning about their world, about the responsibilities they shouldered, and it fascinated me. I had spent so many years in the shadows, listening in and gathering information, but now being part of it all, I felt a new sense of purpose. As they discussed the pack's activities, I thought about Orion. He had been the first real contact I had had with anyone outside their immediate circle, and while I hadn't seen him much, I still wondered about him. My curiosity got the better of me, and I asked, "How is Orion doing?" The moment I spoke his name, the atmosphere shifted slightly. Both Jorvik and Hunter tensed, and I noticed a subtle change in their posture. Jorvik's hand, which had been resting casually on my thigh, tightened, and Hunter's gaze narrowed for just a second. There was a possessiveness there, but it wasn't just directed at Orion. It was for me. "What about him?" Hunter's voice held a slight edge, though he tried to mask it with casualness. I couldn't help but smile, sensing the tension. I leaned back into Jorvik's chest, feigning innocence as I met Hunter's eyes. "I haven't met many people from the pack except for Orion. I wanted to know if he's okay after I tried to pull that boyfriend stunt with him." Jorvik rumbled a laugh behind me, his tone dark and protective.
He's alive, baby girl. Don't worry about him. I giggled at Jorvik's response. That's a relief, I teased, but something about the situation felt unfinished. There was still an unspoken layer to it that I wasn't addressing. I wanted to ask more, but I didn't. You're not seeing him anyhow, Jorvik added, his possessiveness clear in his voice. He avoids this part of the pack like the plague now. I pouted playfully, trying to act disappointed. That's a shame. I would have liked to have someone to toy with. Hunter chuckled softly, the sound of it sending a slight shiver down my spine. Baby girl, the only one you're playing with is us. Jorvik chuckled again, his laugh deep and rumbling. She likes the idea, he said as if reading my thoughts. I rolled my eyes but couldn't suppress the smile on my face. No, I don't, I muttered, though both of them knew it was a lie. The truth was, their attention and the connection we shared had a way of making me feel more alive than I ever had before. And no matter how much I tried to fight it, I couldn't deny it. The conversation shifted again, and once breakfast was over, I excused myself to the library. I needed to focus. I had been working tirelessly on my servers, running diagnostics, trying to track down the lost ones, and looking for any clue that might help me locate where Arika had hidden them. But it felt like I was running in circles, unable to make progress. Every new lead led to a dead end, and it was frustrating. I sat at my desk, scanning through the files Valen had sent, hoping for a breakthrough, but all I found were more questions. Arika's good at covering her tracks. She's calculating and strategic, just like me, but in the worst way. She's using the same tactics I had used, and it made me wonder how far she was willing to go to tear everything apart. But I couldn't give up. I couldn't let her win. The sound of footsteps broke my concentration, and I looked up to see Jorvik standing in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but I could see the concern in his eyes. Valen sent the file, he said, his voice calm but laced with an undercurrent of tension. Did you find anything useful? I exhaled slowly, my frustration bubbling to the surface. Not much. She's covering her tracks well, but I'll keep looking. I have to. Jorvik stepped into the room, his presence grounded me. He sat beside me and placed a hand on my shoulder. We're not going to let her get away with this. We'll find her. His words were simple, but they gave me the strength I needed to keep going. I wasn't alone in this anymore.
Chapter 13. Myra. As the sky began to darken, I stepped outside with Hunter, the cold air biting at my skin. The snow-covered pine trees around us stood tall and proud, their branches dusted with white, shimmering under the fading light. Despite my dislike for the cold, there was something undeniably beautiful about the way the setting sun cast its last rays, turning the snowy treetops into glittering diamonds. I took a deep breath, letting the crisp air fill my lungs. It had been days since I'd stepped outside, and I had been so preoccupied with everything else that I hadn't taken the time to appreciate the beauty around me. But today, in this moment, the stillness and calm of the evening seemed to ground me, easing some of the tension I had been carrying. Hunter was beside me, and I could see the same sense of peace in his expression. His eyes were soft, the weight of the world lifting slightly as we walked together. I had never appreciated the simplicity of a moment like this before, but with him, everything felt more manageable. As we walked toward the woods behind the house, I couldn't help but feel a spark of curiosity. Hunter had always been so in tune with nature, so connected to the world around him. And I realized that despite the challenges we were facing, I was finally starting to see the world through his eyes. Hunter stopped and turned to face me, his hand gently resting on my shoulder. I know it's been a lot lately, he said softly,
his voice full of understanding. "But I want you to know that I'm here. And so is Jorvik. We're in this together." His words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that, to be reminded that I wasn't alone. There was something about the way he said it, something unspoken that made my heart feel lighter. "I'm not going anywhere," he added, his gaze intense. "And neither is Jorvik. We're not just your mates, Myra. We're here to support you in every way." I smiled at him, feeling a warmth spread through me despite the cold. "I know," I whispered, grateful for the reassurance. Just as I was about to say something more, I heard the crunch of snow behind us. I turned to see a large black wolf emerge from the trees, its powerful form moving gracefully through the snow. Jorvik's wolf. I knew it was him before I even saw his eyes. There was a sure way his wolf moved, a quiet confidence that made my wolf stir restlessly inside me. She wanted to be with him, wanted to be part of something bigger than herself, and I could feel her energy pulling me toward him. Hunter must have sensed my shift in energy, because his hand gently squeezed mine. "She's been waiting for this," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. I nodded, my breath catching as I focused on Jorvik's wolf. The connection between us all was undeniable, and I could feel my wolf growing eager. It had been so long since I'd let her come to the surface, and now, with Jorvik's wolf so close, it was impossible to ignore the longing I had for her to emerge. "You're ready," Hunter continued, his voice filled with encouragement. "We'll be here for you every step of the way." I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath as I tried to calm my racing thoughts. I could feel the warmth of the connection between us, Hunter's hand in mine, Jorvik's presence nearby, and it gave me the strength to face the next step. I had been suppressing my wolf for so long, afraid of what would happen, but now I knew it was time to let her free. I focused inward, drawing on the bond I shared with my wolf, imagining her form, her sleek brown fur, her majestic tail, and those eyes, silver and wise. I felt the familiar stir within me, and the first wave of pain hit as my body began to shift. It was always painful, this transition from human to wolf, but the pain was familiar, something I had endured before. Hunter's steady presence beside me helped ground me, and his gentle, encouraging words ushered me forward. "You're doing great, Myra," he whispered, his voice a calming force in the storm of my shifting body. "We're with you. Let her take control." As the pain intensified, I squeezed my eyes shut, focusing on my breathing, in and out and in and out. The transformation was always tricky, but with Hunter and Jorvik nearby, I felt more connected to them than ever. When I opened my eyes again, I was on all fours, my body now fully transformed into my wolf. The shift had been excruciating, but it was over. I felt my wolf's power coursing through me, the strength and grace of her movements. She was a part of me, and I was ready to embrace her completely. I looked up to see Jorvik's wolf watching me with his intense golden eyes. He circled me, studying me with curiosity, and I could feel the connection between us deepen. His gaze was knowing, and I could sense the respect he had for me, for my wolf. Without hesitation, I stood and shook off the last remnants of the transformation, feeling lighter, more at ease in my new form. The anxiety I had been holding on to was now replaced with a sense of belonging, of purpose. This was who I was meant to be. Jorvik's wolf stepped forward, nudging me gently, as he circled me. Hunter's wolf was nearby, watching with an air of protectiveness. It was a moment of unity, of us three coming together as one. I could feel the bond between us strengthen with each passing second. Without warning, Jorvik's wolf broke into a run, and my wolf followed instinctively, her paws pounding the snow as she chased after him. Hunter's wolf stayed behind, watching, waiting for the right moment to join us. We ran through the forest, feeling the wind against our fur, the freedom of the open space filling us with exhilaration. We ran for what felt like hours, letting the terrain and the beauty of the world around us wash over us. And when we finally slowed down by a frozen lake, we stopped to catch our breath. The cool air was refreshing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with myself. Hunter's wolf settled beside me, licking his paws, while Jorvik's wolf stretched and relaxed in the snow. My wolf was alert, but content, aware of her mates beside her. We were all connected, in body and spirit. And I knew in that moment that everything would be okay.
Chapter 14. Myra. The evening had settled into a deep, quiet calm, and as I stepped outside with Hunter, I couldn't help but feel the chill of the air against my skin. The snow-covered pine trees towered around us, their branches heavy with the weight of winter. The wind bit at my exposed skin, sending shivers through my body, but I welcomed the feeling. The cold was sharp, but there was a beauty in it that I couldn't deny. I had never been fond of snow. It reminded me of the bleakness of winter days when the world felt heavy and gray. But tonight, with the setting sun casting its final golden rays over the snowy landscape, I couldn't help but appreciate the sight. The trees looked like they were dusted with diamonds, sparkling against the fading light. It was a fleeting moment of beauty, one I would have missed if I hadn't taken the time to stop and breathe in the crisp, fresh air. As I stood there, inhaling deeply, I felt the tightness in my chest begin to loosen. The stress of the past week, of everything that had been weighing on me, seemed to fade into the background for a moment. The stillness of the evening, combined with the serenity of the snow-covered landscape, calmed the storm within me. I had so much to worry about, but for now, I could let go of that burden, if only for a moment. Hunter stood beside me, his presence as calming as ever. I looked at him, and for the first time in days, I saw the peaceful expression on his face. He was content in this moment, and that comforted me. I had felt so isolated and overwhelmed, but with him here, everything seemed a little more manageable. We started walking toward the woods behind the house, and I followed him without question. My thoughts were still clouded, but there was something about being outside, about being in the presence of my mates, that helped clear the fog in my mind. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't have to carry everything on my own. I didn't have to be the strong one all the time. With them, I could be. As we moved deeper into the woods, I noticed Hunter slowing down, his movements more deliberate. Without saying a word, he began to remove his clothes. I watched him, my eyes trailing over the tattoos that covered his body, each one a story, each one a part of him that I had come to know. The memory of running my fingers over them, tracing their lines, was still fresh in my mind. I had always admired his strength, both physically and emotionally, and his tattoos reflected that strength. They were a part of him, a part of the man I was beginning to understand honestly. He turned to face me, his body bare, and a small smile tugged at his lips. There was a confidence in the way he stood, a quiet strength that radiated from him. I felt my heart skip a beat, but it wasn't just desire I felt. It was a sense of belonging,
a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. He was here with me, and for the first time, I didn't feel so alone in this world. "You're beautiful, Myra," his voice said, soft but filled with sincerity. His words caught me off guard, and I felt a warmth spread through me. But it wasn't just physical. It was something more profound. It was the connection we shared, the bond that was growing between us. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, I felt the unmistakable presence of Jorvik's wolf nearby. The sound of snow crunching underfoot grew louder, and a massive black wolf emerged from the trees. I knew instantly that it was him. His golden eyes locked with mine, and I felt my wolf stir within me, her presence rising to the surface, yearning to join him. Jorvik's wolf sat by the edge of the woods, his gaze fixed on me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. It was a mixture of affection and anticipation, and as I looked into his eyes, I felt my wolf respond, her longing for him palpable. I couldn't suppress the urge to move closer. The bond between us all was undeniable, and as I felt my wolf stir, I knew I was ready to finally embrace the transformation I had been fighting for so long. The time had come for me to let go of the fear, to stop fighting the pull inside me, and to allow my wolf to emerge fully. Hunter's voice broke through my thoughts, soft and reassuring. "We're here for you, Myra. You don't have to do this alone." I nodded, taking a deep breath. His words were a comfort, grounding me as I closed my eyes and focused on my wolf. The transformation was going to be painful. I knew that much. But with them by my side, I could face it. My wolf had been waiting for this moment, and so had I. I felt the first wave of pain hit, sharp and intense. Shifting after so long was never easy, but it was necessary. The feeling of my bones shifting, my muscles stretching, and my skin transforming was a constant reminder of the change I was going through. It felt like my body was being torn apart and put back together again, but I knew it was part of the process. Hunter crouched beside me, his hand gently rubbing my back. His voice was steady, a soothing anchor amidst the chaos of the shift. "You're doing great, Myra. We're right here. Just focus on us." Jorvik's wolf stood watch, his golden eyes never leaving me, his presence a steady reassurance. The connection between us was growing stronger with every passing moment, and I could feel my wolf inching closer to the surface. The pain continued to intensify, but I kept breathing through it, focusing on the bond I shared with my mates. Their presence, their love, it was what kept me grounded in the storm. I wasn't doing this alone. They were here, and I could feel their support every step of the way. When the pain finally subsided, I opened my eyes. I was no longer human. My wolf stood before me, her fur a deep brown, her eyes a silver gleam of recognition. I could feel the shift in myself, the power of my wolf coursing through me. She was a part of me, and I was finally ready to embrace all that she was. Jorvik's wolf stepped forward, his gaze warm and affectionate. He circled me slowly, his movements deliberate as he studied me. Then, without warning, he broke into a run, and my wolf followed instinctively. We raced through the woods, the snow crunching beneath our paws, the freedom of it filling me with exhilaration. Hunter's wolf stayed behind, but I could feel him watching, waiting for the right moment to join us. The bond between the three of us was undeniable, and as we ran together, I felt it grow stronger. We were united, in body, mind, and spirit. We ran for what felt like hours, letting the wind and the snow guide us. When we finally stopped by a frozen lake, I took a moment to catch my breath. The cold air was refreshing, but there was something else, something more. For the first time, I felt a genuine sense of peace. My wolf was no longer a part of me I had to suppress. She was free, and so was I.
We took a brief break and the three of us sat together resting by the lake. The wolf cleaned his paws while Jorvik's wolf stretched and relaxed beside us. My wolf was aware of them, her instincts guiding her, but she was also content, knowing that we were all together. The playfulness in the air was palpable, and I couldn't help but feel the excitement building inside me. As I looked at my maids, I knew that no matter what happened, we would face it together. The challenges that lay ahead seemed a little less daunting now. Together, we were stronger. Together, we were unstoppable.
Chapter 15. The weight of the silence in the library was suffocating. Myra's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her mind still racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. Her eyes were locked on the screen, watching as the words flashed in a steady stream, almost mocking her. System override in progress. The hum of the computers was replaced by an eerie silence, as if the whole world had just stopped, holding its breath. Myra's heart pounded in her chest. She glanced at Hunter and Jorvik, both of them standing by, eyes filled with equal parts confusion and concern. Jorvik stepped closer, his voice low. "Myra, what's going on?" Her fingers shook as she tried to regain control, but the keyboard was unresponsive. Something was happening that was beyond her understanding. The deep sense of dread that had been building within her now exploded into full-blown fear. The room suddenly felt smaller, as if the walls were inching closer, suffocating her. And then the message changed. Eureka isn't the only one who's watching. A shiver ran down her spine, her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just Eureka. Whoever had gained access to the system wasn't just playing a game. They were sending a message. Myra's hands trembled, and she could feel the cold sweat collecting on her brow as the words seemed to burn into her mind. "I don't understand," Myra muttered, her voice barely a whisper. Hunter, usually the calming force, stepped closer. "Myra, what's happening?" But she couldn't speak. Her mind raced with questions. Who else could be involved? What was Eureka's next move, and why was this person taunting her with cryptic messages? Suddenly, the sound of a door creaking open broke the heavy silence, sending a jolt through her body. She whipped around, her gaze snapping to the entrance. Her stomach dropped. There, in the doorway, stood a figure, shrouded in shadow, their silhouette imposing and unfamiliar. Jorvik's eyes narrowed, and his stance shifted, a protective energy radiating from him. Who the hell is that? Myra's heart stopped. She couldn't move, she couldn't breathe. The figure stepped forward, and the dim light finally revealed its features. Myra's eyes widened, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. A familiar face, one she thought she would never see again. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt, the ground beneath her feet threatening to give way. No, it can't be," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jorvik's sharp gaze turned to her, his expression confused, then back at the figure in the doorway. Hunter's posture stiffened as he stepped forward, ready for whatever came next. The figure's voice was cold, cool, and unmistakable. Well, Myra. It's been a long time." Myra felt her blood run cold. The person before her wasn't supposed to be here. Not now. Not after everything. "What do you want?" Her voice cracked, though she tried to steady it. The figure chuckled darkly as it stepped into the room fully. "I don't want anything, Myra. I'm here to give you something." Myra's heart hammered in her chest as the figure tossed something onto the desk in front of her. It was a small, weathered envelope, sealed with an unfamiliar mark. Myra's fingers froze over it, not daring to open it yet, as she stared at the symbol etched in the wax. "This is for you, Myra," the figure continued, their eyes gleaming with something dark and calculating, a little something from an old friend, or should I say, an old enemy. Her pulse quickened, her mind racing. The figure's words echoed in her head. It couldn't be.
This couldn't be happening. Jorvik moved closer, his voice calm, but his eyes burning with intensity. Who are you, and what do you know about Erika? The figure's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't one that held any warmth. Erika is just a pawn, Myra. A small piece in a much larger game. Myra's breath hitched. She felt the ground beneath her tremble, the weight of the revelation settling into her chest like a stone. This wasn't just about Erika. Whoever this person was, they were playing a dangerous game, and Myra was right in the middle of it. Before she could respond, the door behind her slammed shut, and the familiar sound of the library's heavy lock sliding into place echoed in the silence. Hunter turned sharply. What the? But the figure's voice cut him off, cold and final. No one leaves until Myra makes a choice. Myra's heart raced, every instinct screaming at her to move, to fight, to run. But she was paralyzed by the gravity of the situation. This was more than just a confrontation. This was a warning. You've been chasing shadows, and now the shadows have caught up to you. Myra's eyes flickered between the figure and the men she trusted most. She could feel the tension thick in the air, could taste the danger closing in. This wasn't just about Erika. Something much darker, much more dangerous was pulling her into a web she wasn't sure she could escape from. And then, with a sinister finality, the figure stepped back into the shadows, disappearing from sight. Myra was left alone with the envelope, the dark promise it held, and the heavy weight of a choice she didn't even know she had to make. The room was silent once again. But this time, it wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating, oppressive. And in that silence, Myra realized everything was about to change. To be continued.